Before we jump into today's video, I just want to announce that we're at almost 500 subscribers. That's absolutely ridiculous. I never imagined we would get this far, and especially so fast. My first video went up November 17th, 2025, and the day this video releases will be February 16th, 2026. That means in 13 weeks we have gained enough students to move out of the classroom and fill an entire auditorium. Thank you all for your continued support, and anyone new, thank you as well for checking out my channel and giving me an opportunity. Now before I get all mushy, let's get to talking about today's lesson. Ladies and gentlemen, that bell means class is once again in session. Hello and welcome back to Vanguard 101. My name is Raz, and today we'll be going back and revisiting my very first video about understanding space and expanding on a specific piece of that puzzle: creating space. This is something that sounds simple enough on the surface, but the reality is a bit more complicated than that. There are several important details to creating space, such as knowing enemy ability cooldowns and approximate damage output, being aware of flankers or divers who might split your team during your attempted push, understanding the enemy Vanguard presence and how it affects you based on the Vanguard you have chosen, and more. Let's get started. I'm not going to revive the horse just to beat it to death again, but space is an area that your team and the enemy team occupies, which changes over the course of the match based on your actions. You want your space to be bigger so that the enemy's space is smaller. Every player has an impact on the space the team occupies, although Vanguards are most often the ones hunting for opportunities to engage and create space into the enemy team. For a bit more of an in-depth explanation, go back and watch Understanding Space, which I'll put in the card up in the corner for you now. Alright, let's talk about Vanguards. Shocker in this series, I know. But actually, let's talk about them and how they impact your ability to create space. Outside of dive Vanguards, you're most often going to encounter their Vanguards first, and they'll be your main competition in the tug of war to gain the advantage and increase your space. Playing as either a poke or a brawl Vanguard, you'll run at their front line and they'll run at you, and you'll kind of suss each other out to see who's got the stones to make a move and potentially get KO'd for it. Let's take this background match for example. I'm playing Hulk teamed up with Doctor Strange against their Emma Frost and Ben Grimm, which later becomes Emma Frost and Magneto. There were a fair number of swaps this game, and I write my voiceovers before I input and edit my matches, so I actually have no idea what we're watching right now. Did I just die? Probably. I'm good at that. Anyway, focusing. Every Vanguard brings a unique issue to worry about, and each pair of Vanguards then provides a new set of issues on top of what they have individually. For example, against an Emma and Ben, I will be doing absolutely zero diving. That is a quick trip to Bannerville, and I do not like going there because they're mean to puny Banner. While that doesn't affect me personally, as I've always preferred to brawl as Hulk, a more dive-focused Hulk player would have to make some concessions. If we had a diving duelist on our team, they would also have to be more careful and potentially swap. Ben presents a unique issue for my Doctor Strange, as Ben's punches go right through his little mystical wavy hand symbol stuff, making his shield null and void when Ben wants to fight. Ben is also immune to displacement, so if I were the type of Hulk player who likes to juggle in monster, which I am not, that's one less target I'd be able to do it to. They also have a fairly strong response to any aggression with Ben, as he can embattled leap back to provide damage reduction and continue brawling with whoever tries to push up. Emma does considerable damage, and that only increases the longer she remains in combat, which means prolonged fights will become extremely punishing. I'm not gonna make a Punisher joke. That's too low-hanging fruit, even for me. To be frank, dang it! To be honest, their front line has some pretty imposing benefits and not a ton of drawbacks. But what we have is a Flyer and a Black Widow into a team that has a weakness to poke, and two melee duelists in a Magic and a Daredevil. Ben is a huge target and basically a walking ult battery, and if you can either skirmish with Emma so she can't keep her charge up, or hit her from outside of her effective range, a lot of her threat is diminished. Ben is also less powerful when he's hitting lower HP targets, so if he tries to engage with a battle blitz on anyone other than myself or Strange, he's less threatening than probably anybody else on his team. We spend quite a bit of time early on playing a bit more passively, and while we are playing a bit farther back to start, whenever we find a weak link in the chain to exploit, we quickly push back up again and reclaim what we willingly gave away. You'll see the Strange and I engaging in the stance dance that I mentioned in its own video, shuffling back and forth as needed to protect one another and keep a frontline presence, and you can watch the enemies do the same. I find it interesting to watch the way that each Vanguard pairing has a unique way to perform the dance, and I learn a lot by watching the way the enemy does their dance to tell me information. You can tell generally more coordinated Vanguard pairs by how seamless the switch is. If the primary Vanguard throws up a defensive ability and you can watch the secondary Vanguard move into position while the primary stands in place and absorbs damage until they arrive, and you can also tell a less coordinated pair by watching the primary flail around and potentially give up space as they begin to panic that their backup isn't coming. In the case of teams with a diving Vanguard, finding and exploiting a weakness in the primary Vanguard, such as bad cooldown management or not playing around natural cover, can give you that in to take space from the enemy team, as the dive becomes the secondary Vanguard and they're less capable of holding the front if they're forced to return, meaning you can, in some cases, actually completely ignore the diving Vanguard and take out their entire team before you turn for them at all. As mentioned in my ult economy video, if you have a general sense for how long it takes enemies to generate their ults, you can use that as another point of entry. Knowing that the enemy Magneto doesn't have his ult, you can have your Punisher or Star-Lord ult and get 1 or 2 picks on priority targets like strategists, after which most teams will naturally begin to collapse, as the incoming damage has either less healing or no healing to offset it, meaning that your damage is more impactful at pushing them back, which then in turn creates space for your team to occupy. If you know Emma has her ult, playing more defensively to prevent your backline from being mind controlled into a squirrel stampede can make or break a team fight. If a Hulk lets himself take a large chunk of damage without shielding or attempting to jump away, chances are he has monster available and is waiting to get his health low to refill it, so that's when you save up your CC abilities to be ready for him to become the largest target in Marvel Rivals. While ult pacing is one thing, you can also watch the way enemies play to give you an idea of when a particular ult might be available, and can do the same with even basic abilities. When Magneto doesn't have his personal bubble and his shield has been expended, for example, he most often looks for natural cover or backs up behind the other Vanguard. Try to force out his allied bubble, and then you can look to move in on his team while his defensive options are limited or potentially none. When he backs up to a corner or behind a wall, he is yielding space, no matter how little it might be. Maybe only a step or two, but that is still space that is being given up. Next up, on to awareness for divers and flankers, and this game was actually a perfect example. With their duelists being Magic and Daredevil until the later stages of the match, they weren't often pushing directly into us, or if they were, it was a more staggered approach from multiple angles at once. This is where both voice comms and pings come in handy, helping to keep you aware of things that you might not be looking at or potentially are unable to see due to the particle effects in this game getting so severe that sometimes I'm worried I'm going to go temporarily blind if I don't wear sunglasses. Their repeated attempts at poking into our space by looking to dive our backline required a frontline response, which means that the actual frontline has less reinforcement until the diver is handled. That in itself can be a source of strife, as high damage Vanguards can and often will take advantage of the numbers being in their favor to try and get a pick on the Vanguard left holding alone. But if your response is quick to the dive, you can then just as quickly return to reinforce the other Vanguard. Keeping in contact with your duelists and strategists is beneficial for the entire team for a litany of reasons, some of which include, well, keeping them alive. 6 is more than 5 after all. When you start losing people, you also lose space. While your bubble of space might be very wide around an entire area, like say an objective point for example, if you lose one person, that cuts off an entire chunk of the bubble and the enemy can push into and occupy it, forcing your circle to collapse inward to defend where there used to be someone. Keep an eye on your kill feed so you know when someone goes down, be that ally or enemy, and adjust your aggression on the fly to fit the situation. If you hear the enemy cloak and dagger ult, but then see that your Hawkeye headshot them, several pieces of critical information were just gained. C&D doesn't have their ult for a while, they're gone from the fight, and their ult no longer exists. Now you as a Venom can swing into their other strategist and harass them, forcing focusing their attention toward you and enabling your team to push while the enemy are receiving no healing. All of those little things very rapidly begin to add up. Small adjustments are most often what hold people back after gaining a basic sense of the game. It's not very often that someone makes a super obvious mistake like ulting off the side of the map once they have some hours under their belt. Let's briefly talk about swaps, as you'll see that I made a few. I played 5 Vanguards in total this match, being Hulk, The Thing, Emma Frost, Doctor Strange, and Rogue. Doctor Strange was just for the portal, so we can discount him and just say 4. However, in those 4 Vanguards, I not only dealt the largest amount of damage in the entire game, but I also blocked the second highest. Swaps will often be an integral part of Marvel Rivals, and knowing when to make them and what to swap to can save a game that looks like a loss. This match was over 20 minutes long in total, and we fought tooth and nail for every bit of it. Hulk had his benefits early on, with exiles, bubbles, and consistent damage, but eventually we needed more damage, so I moved to Emma Frost. Realizing we needed more defensive power than a 400 HP shield sometimes, I had to swap again into Ben Grimm. You'll see that I stayed on Ben for a large portion of the match, only switching to Rogue for our final defense as we decided to go 3-0-3 and lean into a strong sustain comp to hold the enemy team off. Understanding the value that each Vanguard brings is key to knowing who to swap to and when, and a large portion of that will come with time, but here is a starter tip I can give. You can think of Vanguard archetypes like a rock, paper, scissors style triangle. Rock beats scissors, scissors beats paper, and paper beats rock. In general, before y'all start coming for me in the comments, poke beats brawl, brawl beats dive, and dive beats poke. This isn't a hard rule for every matchup all the time, no matter what, but it can give you a launching point for your own adaptations during a match. So let's recap. When we talk about creating space, we're referring to finding little cracks in the proverbial armor, small tears that you can wiggle your way into and expand. These can come in the form of picks, poor cooldown management allowing more aggressive play, different pacing of ultimate charge, and poor reinforcement of front lines during dives. Knowing what the enemy Vanguards are capable of and getting a sense for their coordination can, in turn, allow you to make educated guesses or informed decisions about how to pace your match, where and when to look for fights, and how to play with your other Vanguard. Character swaps are almost a necessity, but you can't always just switch to another Vanguard because you like them or because you've heard they counter a specific character. While this can work, it can also just as easily backfire if there's someone you're not familiar with or they're countered by other parts of the team comp that you hadn't considered. Do your best not to get flustered or frustrated, keep a level head, and play your best for yourself, if not for your team. Now, some quick closing words. Again, I want to thank you so much for all of your support, and I can't believe we're about to hit 500 subscribers. At 500, I'll be able to apply for YouTube Partner, and I literally couldn't have gotten this far without you guys. I know I've got a long way to go yet, but making those small steps every week has been an absolute blast. With that bell means that class is once again dismissed. Leave a like on your way out the door, drop a comment for the algorithm if you'd be so kind, and subscribe for more education-focused content with the occasional dad joke tossed in to farm eye rolls.